Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. First, I'd just like to acknowledge my constituent, Astrid Johnson, who's here in the audience. We're going to hear her story in the second panel, but thank you so much for being here and for your advocacy. I want to follow up on the question that my colleague, Dr. Barrett, asked around this question of domestic abuse. In 2020, the official guide to good practice on the Hague Convention's grave risk exception was published, and it clarifies that this exception does not require, for example, that the child be the direct or primary victim of physical harm if there is sufficient evidence that because of a risk of harm directed to a taking parent, there is a grave risk to the child. Last year, actually, one of my constituents fled another country to the United States, fled another country to escape her abusive husband, who eventually filed a Hague Convention petition to obtain custody of their 2 children. So I just want to ask you, I know you said the recommendation is you tell people to avail themselves of the services here in the United States. I think we know that those aren't always perfect. As I said in the guidelines, that actually this is supposed to be taken account. So how do you view this grave risk exception? What steps are you taking to ensure that that mechanism, it provides sufficient protection? And how have you made sure we're playing a constructive role in ensuring that these guidelines are implemented as intended?
Thank you for that. This is an issue that is of concern, I mean, obviously not just to us, but to the entire international community that works on the Hague Convention. It's something that is frequently discussed. With regard to 13B, the exception for grave risk to a child, which is intended to be used in exceptional cases. Obviously, domestic violence against a parent can affect the child. We all know that. The convention talks about returning the child to their habitual residence, not necessarily to the care of the other parent, although often that parent does have a custodial rights. Usually does, always does. But one of the trends that has become incredibly important in these cases, especially when there's concerns about domestic violence, is direct judicial communication. When I worked in the Office of Children's Issues previously, this was a foreign concept in many countries. In fact, in many civil law countries, judges were prohibited from speaking to other judges about a case. With the creation of a Hague network, a Hague judge network of experienced judges around the world in all the different countries, partner countries, this has encouraged and facilitated direct communications between judges. So, for example, a judge hearing a case in a foreign country who has concerns about the possibility or the allegations of domestic violence can speak to a judge, in this case in the United States, to say what protective measures will be put into place. If I order this child returned, what kinds of protective measures would be put into place to protect the parent and the child? And that's something that has been very useful in resolving these cases, consistent with the convention, returning the child to their habitual residence, while still respecting the protection of a victim of domestic violence.
And I appreciate that, and I know it's a very tricky part of this. I guess in the case of my constituent, they fled another country to the United States. And obviously we know where the U.S. Judicial system is imperfect, in some other countries there's not even a judicial system that addresses domestic violence or takes it as a crime. So how would that work in the case where you're fleeing from a country like that to the United States?
The judge in the United States might be could be put into contact with a judge in the other foreign country to talk through, and will make their ruling based on that discussion, based on what they learn. And based on they're the judge, they can make these decisions.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jacobs.